This is a special episode of the Janus Project, and this is another book review, but we're actually going to be reading chunks of this book, and hopefully it doesn't get me get this video banned or anything like that. But I think this is a very important book. It's one of those books that is super short. You can read this thing in about 15 minutes. I'm really tempted to, but I want you to go buy the book and then read it that way. Now, online, there is a rule that you'll see show up every now and then, and it's this idea of the longer a discussion goes, the more likely someone is to compare you to Hitler. And then that just ends the conversation. And typically the person who brought up Hitler is looked at as the person who lost. But in this book, Andy Andrews, the book is entitled How Do You Kill 11 Million People? In this book, what Andy Andrews does is he shows the rise of the Nazi Party and shows how they lied to people, and then shows how people responded to them in that they kind of just believed the lies and then started telling their own. And so I think it's a fascinating look at human nature. I think it's a fascinating look at some of the things that people will do to keep themselves out of trouble, to convince themselves that everything's all right. And the thing I find fascinating about this book, again, How Do You Kill 11 Million People? The thing I find fascinating about it is apolitical, and you really can apply it to all sorts of political issues. So he specifically does not name like, oh, I'm against this party, I'm for that. No, it doesn't matter. And so what I want to do is I want to get right into it. Go buy this book. Read it. Every now and then reread it. It's just good to have. And again, there's some really good questions in the back we'll look over. But again, don't let my reading of the book dissuade you from going and getting a copy. It is a few bucks, but I think you should. I think you should do it. Now, I am going to read straight from the author's note in the beginning here. It says this: For many years, I have been asked to speak at political gatherings of one type or another, and for many years, I have consistently declined. Because the books I write are generally regarded as common sense literature, novels that illustrate life's principles, I suppose many politicians have simply assumed I was on their side. However, I am not an us or them kind of person. Actually, I'm more of a we person. Don't get me wrong, I do have some absolutes carved into this heart and mind, but I am optimistic enough to believe there is still common ground enough for those of us who might disagree. Don't we all want the best for our country and a secure and prosperous future for our children? Of course we do. And I believe that we can talk about divisive subjects without screaming at one another. Somehow, for the most part, our parents and grandparents managed to disagree with their neighbors and still remain neighborly. And they usually did it from their front porches. Today, most of us don't even have front porches. We've retreated to the backyard, where a single opinion can be isolated and enforced by a privacy fence. Several years ago, I asked myself these three questions. Where do we begin to find common ground in regard to what we want or don't want for the future of America? Is it possible to write something that doesn't use the words Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, yet conveys a message which everyone would agree? And can it be written in a concise fashion, allowing anyone to read it clearly and understand the message, and be empowered in less than 15 minutes? Here, then, is my answer to these questions. Andy Andrews, written from Orange Beach, Alabama. Now, again, I'm not going to read the whole book because, again, I don't want to cheapen it. I don't want to rob him of the profit he so rightly deserves for writing this book. But I do find it interesting. Right off the bat, he quotes Plato, and he says, "The punishment which the wise suffer who refuse to take part in the government is to live under the government of worse men." I believe it's the way Daniel puts it in the Bible. He says that God sets up over men the basest of men. And so we have this idea that our government officials are these high and noble people who have better intellect than us. No, they don't. They're the basest of men. All right, and I think we'd agree. I mean, if you hate Trump, you think he's a narcissistic slob who just doesn't deserve any respect at all. And if you hate Biden, you think the man's a few fries short of a Happy Meal and probably couldn't find his way out of his basement without help. And that's kind of the way we look at it, and we're like, hey, one of these guys is going to be the president. Take part in the government. Take part in the voting process. Figure out who you can support in good conscience and vote. But go out there and vote. But I think the difficulty is we're being lied to so much. I mean, the lies are coming just thick. It's so stupid, some of the things that politicians say. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, some of the things the newspapers are saying. Hate Trump all you want, but The Atlantic came out. It's September 11th when I'm recording this. The Atlantic which I don't know if you can consider it news. It's actually trying to advocate that we should get rid of the Nobel Peace Prize because Donald Trump got nominated twice. Now, I went and did a little bit of research, and the whole reason Obama got nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and he got nominated about 2 weeks after he got elected, like 2 weeks into his presidency. So, like, I don't know if it was elected or inauguration, but basically he'd been doing his stuff for about 2 weeks, and it was because they hoped that he would be a peaceful guy. They hoped he would continue with some of the things he had proposed in the first 2 weeks, and that's why they nominated him. Even he was kind of like, I don't deserve this. He still took it. He donated the funds that he got from it to charity, but I don't remember the Atlantic screaming about that. But because Donald Trump brokered a few peace deals, which were actually pretty big deals, they're actually like, oh, I think we should do away with the Nobel Peace Prize. It's stupid now. We're being lied to. We're being manipulated. We're being twisted around in circles. And so, again, I think it's important that we need to be well educated. I remember years ago, I was a teacher in New Hampshire. And with my students, I had a project where I wanted them to go research the politicians that were running for a certain office. I said, I want you to go research where they stand on various topics. And I remember one of my students coming back and he was like, my mom was going to vote for this guy, but then we found out he stood for this, and she's not voting for him anymore. What did that say about us? That we would vote for a guy because he's got name recognition. We vote for a guy because he's the D on the ticket or the R on the ticket. How about you study out where these guys stand and you actually do some work and some research and you say, you know what? This topic is really important to me. This guy doesn't stand there at all. I found it really, really hilarious. Some of you might know Scott Adams. He writes Dilbert, but he's also a trained hypnotist. He's very, very good at just convincing language. And what he likes to do is he likes to spot people lying. And he says one of the things that you can kind of tell when people are lying is their eyes get really wide, and you can kind of tell that they have some cognitive dissonance going on, which basically means what they're saying isn't matching what they believe. And you can kind of see it in their eyes. Well, whether you like to believe it or not, back when Donald Trump shut down travel into this country, so he shut it down from China first, and then he shut it down from Europe. And he was called xenophobic by Joe Biden for shutting down travel from China to United States because of COVID. And so Biden looked at him and said he was xenophobic for it. Well, one of Biden's representative, which whose last name is Ducklow, which I find amazing, he was on the news recently, and someone asked him about that and was like, so Biden he agreed with Trump on that? And he's like, I can show you abundant evidence that there's fact checking that he didn't disagree. And the guy's like, well, let me clarify. Like, so you're saying he agreed with the travel ban, which video evidence exists of Biden saying actually that he thought it was xenophobic. But again, the guy can actually come right out when there's videographic evidence saying the opposite, and he can say, of of course Joe Biden agreed with Trump on the travel ban. I mean, he didn't disagree. That's a lie. Don't believe it. Go do your research. And another one that's commonly put out. You might remember the white supremacists who were there protesting Charlottesville and some things like that. Back like right when Donald Trump took over, there was a lot of protests, and you had a bunch of tiki torch carrying prep school guys. At least that's what they looked like. And Donald Trump got up and he said there are a bunch of good people on both sides, and that lie has been like spread ever since. And so what you've got is you've even got Joe Biden who says, oh, Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists, good people. The really funny thing is, if you look at the transcript and if you listen to the audio of what Trump said, he specifically said, I'm not talking about neo-Nazis and white supremacists. They need to be condemned. But there were other people there, and there are good people on both sides of the debate on whether we should tear down some of these statues. That's what he was saying. But again, even Joe Biden is spreading the lie that Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists good people. You've got the newest one out with Donald Trump, and it's saying that his military command, like these 6 anonymous sources in the Atlantic, okay, make of that what you will, but they're saying that Donald Trump bashed the military. And you got all these other people who were there saying, that's a lie. That didn't happen. But what happens is people hate Donald Trump with such a fervor that they are willing to believe anything the media spins. They'll take words completely out of context. I got in a discussion with someone on Twitter recently because they were trying to say, oh, Donald Trump said that, like the good people hoax. Donald Trump said that later. And I had to point out, that's what a clarification is. If I said something, and let's say I misspoke, or let's say someone took what I said in a different way than I meant it, it is entirely allowable for me to step in and go, you didn't get that right. Let me explain to you what I meant. Now, I know politicians lie all the time, and some politicians will say, no, I didn't say that, but the video evidence actually says, no, you said that. That's not how clarifications work. If I say something that could be taken two different ways, and then I come back and clarify to say, I meant it this way, you can't come along and say, no, you can't clarify. I think you meant it that way. No. Words have meanings. I get to define what my words meant. You don't. And so that's why you need to pay attention to what people say. Don't let people lie to you. Look for the truth. And so if you absolutely hate Donald Trump, I would really challenge you. Go look at the things that the man has done. Get over the fact that he's a jerk on Twitter, because I imagine you're pretty much a jerk on Twitter or Facebook too. Probably more than you think you are. Unless you're extremely careful, you're probably a pretty big jerk. The only reason you hate Trump for it is because he's in a political office and he does it with more of an audience than you have. So I find it hilarious when people absolutely hate Trump because he's a jerk. Yeah, he's a jerk. He's a blowhard. But look at his policies. Look at his actions. Look at the things that this man has done to defend the country. And we can get on his case for being imprecise with language. I love the latest one where they're trying to downplay and they're saying like, oh, he said he was going to downplay the coronavirus. Oh, and he said specifically, and he said this, I remember him during one of his briefings. He specifically said, I tried to downplay the danger of the coronavirus because I'm a cheerleader for the country. And also, he didn't want people to panic. Think about what happened the moment things got locked down. All the toilet paper vanished. Could you imagine if Donald Trump came out and said, this is a deadly disease and you need to all hide? Could you imagine the panic? But every day he came on and tried to encourage and tried to show the good news and tried to show the things that were going on. And you know what the news media did, like CNN? Oh, let's talk about how many people died today. Let's talk about how many people died today. Let's talk about how many people died today. That's not helpful. That spread fear. It spread just panic among people. We know it's a dangerous disease. We know it's killing people. We don't need to be told every single day, 100,000 dead, 110,000 dead, 120,000 dead. We know it's bad. Just give us a break. Give us some good news. And that's why I appreciated what Trump said, because Trump came along and he said, I'm going to be as encouraging as possible, but I'm also going to encourage you to stay home so we can slow the spread. And he acted well within his authority and actually stopped well before some people said, oh, you need to go do this. And he's like, I don't have the authority to. And so there's things like that where you can see where Donald Trump in public put on a face so that he could encourage people. But if you look at all the work he was doing behind the scenes to say, we are going to stop this, we're going to set up a task force for this. I mean, we're talking all the way back in January and February. You will see him talking about coronavirus during the State of the Union, which means he knew it was a problem and he started doing something about it way back then. But you know what I find amazing is the media waits till now to try to drag him behind the bus to say, look, back in January and February, Trump knew this was dangerous. And look what he was saying in public. And we're like, yeah, he was trying to downplay the danger in public so people wouldn't panic. And you know what other politicians were doing, like Nancy Pelosi? Come down to Chinatown. Ignore the fact that they're saying don't go these places. That's why I don't appreciate the lies. So don't let yourself be lied to. And I'm sure there's things that Trump has done that deserve to be brought to people's attention. All right? But we need to be honest about things. We need to be open about things. Don't allow lies to form the basis for your decision. Now, we're going to continue with a little bit of this book because, again, this is a review of the book. I want you guys to appreciate the truth and what the truth has to offer. Don't believe the lies. What process are you using to make your decisions? Emotion cannot be the basis for your decision making. I met too many people who I've tried to explain the other side of the story. There's a conflict going on. I've dealt with conflict resolution for years. I was a teacher for years. I taught on a college level for a few years. So I deal with high school students. It's ridiculous, some of the things I've got to deal with. And there are times where I'm trying to show this person the perspective of that person and trying to make them understand where the other one's coming from. And I've had people shut me down because I'm trying to explain to them, that's not what you think it is. And it's like, well, that's wrong. And it's like, hold on, stop. Can we please just get to the truth? Can we believe the best in one another? No, no, that's just terrible. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess we're not going to be able to have a discussion here. And I've had that happen where people have shut me down as I'm trying to be a peacemaker and I'm trying to draw attention to different conflicts and different worldviews that people are operating off of to try to bring them all to a common point to say, can we get along? And it's nope, nope, shut up. You're insert insult here. That's not how you approach decision making. You need to approach decision making with a rational mind. You need to look forward and say, where are my decisions going to take me? Because there are times where the decisions you are making may sound perfectly reasonable right now, but you're setting yourself up for a failure. You're building a pattern, a habit that's going to destroy you in the long run. And so that's why I say we have to operate off of truth. We cannot operate off of emotion. Now, continuing though, this is as he starts off his book, he says this. He's quoting the Bible. For you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Those are probably the most famous words ever spoken on the subject of truth. Most of us accept that particular sentence at face value. It certainly resonates with our spirit. It just feels right. But what does it mean exactly? And have you ever contemplated the meaning that comes to light by inverting this principle? If it is correct that you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free, then is it a possibility that if you don't know the truth, its absence can place you in bondage? Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the anger and I've seen the hatred and I've seen the just outright corruption that can take over someone because they believe a lie. You have to believe the truth. Now, as he continues, he says, as a boy, I quickly learned that if someone found out the truth, I might get in trouble, or I wouldn't get chosen, or I wouldn't be as well liked. Yet my parents urged me to tell the truth and went so far as to promise that I would not be spanked if only I told the truth. At Hurd Elementary School, I told my fourth grade classmates that Elvis Presley was my cousin. I suppose it was my way of courting popularity at the time, but Elvis was not my cousin. What I publicly declared in the cafeteria was not true, and for a time, though it didn't seem possible, I became even less popular. It was a good lesson, and it helped me determine that in the future I would tell the truth. Now, I want you to think that over, because as we deal with some of the politicians, even like Joe Biden, who's running for office, I want you to think back over the past, because the man has lied about a lot of stuff. There's times he talked about war stories. He was lying. He wasn't there. There's times he talked about being in the civil rights movement. He didn't. There's times he talked about top of his class, and he was actually, if I remember correctly, towards the bottom of his class. He just lies. And so do a lot of politicians. Pretty much every politician is going to lie. They tell you promises that they're not going to keep. They tell you things they're going to do, and they don't do it. They're just lying. That's why, whether you're for Trump or Biden, do not put your trust in a politician. All right? What you need to do is you need to look at their track record. You need to look at the actions that they've done, and that is what matters, not their words. Look at what they're doing. Don't look at what they're saying. What they're saying, who cares? Someone could be very eloquent, very persuasive, very talkative. But if their actions and their repeated actions and their repeated actions and their repeated actions don't actually back up what they're saying, then they're a liar and they don't deserve your trust anymore. I must say, let me just give you a little background on myself. Back in 2016 or 2015, I guess you could say, I was a never Trumper. Okay, I did not like Trump. I thought he was a scumbag. The man was a louse morally, and I don't appreciate that in someone. I think if you can't be faithful to your wife, it's kind of hard to think that you're going to be faithful to your country. And so there's things like that Donald Trump did that I was like, you know what, I'd never vote for him. Now, my gut didn't hold out. It was a gut check, because when it came down to him or Hillary Clinton, oh boy, it was that tough decision. I knew my vote wouldn't matter at all, because I live out here in California, and you can vote for whoever you want on the conservative side. Your vote's not getting counted. And so I just could not stand the possibility of my vote helping Hillary. And so I voted Trump. I freely admit it. But I was not extremely excited about my vote. Okay. It was basically voting for what I considered the far lesser of two evils, but still pretty evil. I was not excited. There was a little bit. I'm a hopeful person. I live a lot of my life based on a lot of hope, and there was a level of, you know what, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Maybe he did an okay job. I don't know, but Ronald Reagan, he was a pretty good president. People didn't give him a lot of credit before he got elected because he was a movie star, and you're like, Reagan, but he turned out really good. And so I had this vague hope that maybe Trump would be a Reagan. Maybe Trump would be this guy who could turn out really good. And can I say honestly, over the last 4 years, I have watched as Trump has defended the right to bear arms. I have watched as Trump has condemned racist behavior. I have watched as Trump has looked at people who are in jail for really minor drug offenses and said, I'm gonna do what I can to lessen your sentence. I watched as Trump said religious services are essential. I've watched as he was, I believe, the only president who spoke at like pro-life rallies and made a big push against abortion, which is a huge thing in my book. And so I stood back and I was like, here's this guy who's kind of a sketchy businessman. We don't know anything about where he will be. Ugh, this is scary. And I've watched as, while I've not agreed with everything that he said, I looked at what he did and I said, you know what, this is a man I can get behind. I don't agree with everything he does, but this is a man I can get behind because he said he would do it, and you know what? He hasn't kept every promise, but he's kept a good bit. And that's why over and over and over again I can look and I can say, Joe Biden has been in political office for, like 40 years. And he keeps talking about, I'm going to improve race relations, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And I look and I go, how come you haven't done it for 40 years? How come you didn't do it when it wasn't the popular thing? But Donald Trump comes in ripping and roaring. He stands up for American values and kind of, hey, how about we don't tear down all these statues, but how about we have a discussion about it? And you know what? I'm not going to condemn everyone on both sides, but man, I'm going to condemn those people who are burning down cities. I don't think that's right. And I'm going to condemn the people who disrespect our flag. That doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem the American thing to do. And you know what? I'm going to condemn I'm going to investigate the Chauvin guy who puts his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes. I'm going to order an FBI investigation of that thing because that seems odd. And he doesn't just come right out and condemn. He just says, we're going to investigate. We're going to do what our law system is set up to do. And he's willing to call out the media, which they're phonies. They're so full of it. And I look and I go, he's a little brash. He's a little crude, a little vulgar. He's not someone I'm like, I'm excited about everything you say. But the dude knows how to do what he said he'd do. Maybe because he's a businessman and he's run a lot of successful businesses. More so than most other presidents we've had. So no wonder he's being really successful. And no wonder those who are of a different ideological bent absolutely hate him. And so Donald Trump's not lying. He's actually doing what he said, and he's actually putting action behind his words. Whereas a guy like Biden, he just keeps spouting. That's why I don't trust Biden. He's all talk. He's had 40 years to do stuff, and he hasn't done it. Now, as we continue in this book, and we're going to have to continue the review some other time just for time's sake, but he's drawing attention to the fact that he lied and made up stuff to try to make himself more popular. And when the truth came out, it actually made him less popular. But it was better for him because it made him learn to tell the truth. He says, throughout my formative years and on into young adulthood, the truth became a touchstone, a goalpost, something to strive for. The truth was always within my sight, usually respected, but sometimes compromised. Once I watched on television as the President of the United States resigned his office in disgrace. It was Nixon. At that time, it didn't occur to me that the nation was in so much turmoil and the president was in so much trouble, not because what he had done, but because he had lied about it. And that really is why Bill Clinton got in big trouble too. I mean, he committed adultery in the Oval Office, and when they asked, did you do this? He was like, oh, I didn't have sex with that woman. I mean, you can watch the video. He says specifically to your face, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. It was a bull-faced lie. And then when it came out that he was lying, people were like, well, what's it matter? He's not telling the truth. That's what matters. The truth matters. Look for a candidate. Look for a presidential candidate who is going to tell the truth. And if you're looking at both of them, look for the one who has told the most truth, because you're never going to get someone who's told the truth all the time. Look for the one who has told the most truth, and look for the one who has the most actions that back up the things he's saying, because then you know that they're actually telling the truth. Now, again, he goes on, he says, as an adult, I became a student of history. For some reason, I am fascinated by what people said and what nations did so many years ago. I'm also interested in the results. What are the outcomes these civilizations produced as they reacted to what people said and what nations did so many years ago? I often wonder, do those outcomes have any bearing on us today? Should we be more careful students of the events and decisions that have shaped our lives and nations of those who have gone before us? A long time ago, I decided that if history were to be of any value in my life, I could not succumb to the temptation of convenience in regard to my personal beliefs or desires. In other words, I would not be able to categorize people and nations as good guys or bad guys to suit my political or religious beliefs. The truth in what I uncovered would have to trump everything. Everything I'd ever thought or taught or believed. Quietly, I could only hope that what I had been taught and believed was true. Now he starts his study back in the Dark Ages, Middle Ages, and all of that. And again, he just keeps going up through history. But as he gets going, he points out this: history was simply recorded by the man with the sharpest axe. So we must understand that the history books and what we're told is true might not necessarily be true. And so there are ways that we can piece together the past and start putting together what really happened. And we can start putting together the truth. And as you read books, a few books that have kind of influenced my thinking, Why You Think the Way You Do is a really powerful book. It traces kind of the history of philosophy from Roman times all the way up to modern day. The Royal Art of Poison, if you have the stomach for it, is another really powerful book. It shows that, the people who are on the cusp of scientific discovery were not as scientific as you thought they were. Did you know that a lot of astronomy was discovered or explored simply because they wanted better up-to-date astrological charts? So it wasn't for the unbelievable love of learning. It was so that their astrological charts were good. A lot of the poison remedies were actually probably just as poisonous or useless, but some of it was the latest science, latest philosophy. It was crazy. And so that's why, when you talk about the latest science and we need to be updated with the latest science, just wait a few years. It might be outdated. So just be careful. Don't always be on the cutting edge. But again, history is recorded by the person with the sharpest axe, and not everything you read is necessarily pictured in the right light. I love Eric Metaxas and some of the things he's written. And he has a whole book on Bonhoeffer and all the resistance fighters that were there in Germany fighting against the Nazi occupation. And some of them were too scared, and some of them reached out to guys like Churchill for help, but Churchill actually found it easier to just label all Germans we're just going to assume they're all Nazis, and we're not going to trust this little group that's trying to resist. And so it kind of sheds a weird light on some of our heroes as you start looking into what they really did. And that's why I'm like, no historical figure is going to come out unscathed. Now, again, he goes through and he talks about how Hitler came into power. And Hitler really came into power by lying to people. And so that's why he has, in the middle of this page, he says this: to answer that question effectively, I would ask you another question. How do you kill 11 million people? He's talking about the Jews and the Gypsies and all those people who died in the Holocaust. And he's like, how do you do that? And it really is, you lie to them. And he draws attention in this book as you go through the story. The Jews were told, we are going to protect you. And so we're going to put you in this special area, and people are coming for you. We're going to start putting walls around you to protect you. And then what they started doing is they started saying to them, hey, we've received word that we're about to be bombed and things like that. And we have a safe place for you. So we need you guys to get together, and we're going to take you on a train to a safe place. And they were taking them to a death camp. They lied to them. And sometimes they got their own leaders to lie to them, whether complicitly or not, I don't know. And then as people started realizing they were lied to, and then it was too late and they started being forced on, he tells the story of some of these Christians who would be in their churches, and there would be a train car going by, and they would know that there's a train car full of Jews going to a death camp, and they would hear screaming and the trains and all those things going on, and they would start singing louder and singing louder and singing louder. And he draws attention to that fact to say, there's so many things in our world today that we need to act upon. But we're pretty much acting like those Christians in that church who just simply decided they were going to sing louder so they didn't have to hear the chaos, the death that's outside. I can't help but think about the protests and the riots that are going on in our streets right now. And the protests and the riots that are going on in our streets right now are being done in the name of black lives that are being taken by cops. That's a noble end. That's a noble goal. I don't think police brutality should be something that's tolerated. But I also don't think that burning down buildings and shattering windows and dragging people around and beating people or hunting people and shooting them like they did in Portland, I don't think that should be tolerated either. And I find it funny that you've got a guy like Don Lemon who can be in a debate with a guy, Terry Crews, on CNN a month or so ago. And Terry Crews is drawing attention to the fact that more black babies are killed through abortion than could ever hope to be killed by a cop. And Don Lemon has the gall to say Black Lives Matter is only about police brutality. And I've had people who I asked, and they said, yeah, that's what Black Lives Matter is about. It's about police brutality. And yet, a lot of those people will turn a deaf ear to abortion, which kills more black babies than anything else. And they'll turn a blind eye to the crime, the gang violence in cities, which kills more people sometimes on a weekend, more black people on a weekend, than are killed in a year by cops. But they'll protest when a guy who's been credibly accused of sexually molesting his girlfriend, and when he ignores cops' commands and he's shot in the back for it, that guy's held up as a hero. But they won't do anything about the doctor who can rip a baby to shreds and then put it back together to make sure he got all the pieces out. There's something wrong in our country. I think, to use Andy Andrews' comparison, I think a lot of people, even in the church, are singing louder, or they found that comfortable thing to protest, and they don't want to talk about the vile wickedness that is the abortion mill. It's really easy to protest the nebulous patriarchy, or the nebulous white supremacy, or the very nebulous whatever you want to fill in the gap with. But they can't sit there and condemn an abortion doctor who recommends to a mom, you should just abort this one. I'll give my testimony about abortion on some other video. But I think it's abhorrent that we can excuse a woman's right to choose to kill her baby for economic reasons. And yet we will burn down a city because we value the life of a criminal so much that we say he didn't deserve to die like that. And we could seriously have the discussion of whether he deserved to die like that or not. I'm not saying he did. But if we're gonna have that discussion, and if you're gonna say Black Lives Matter, which they do, then we have to be willing to say all Black Lives Matter. I'm not even going to go so far as to say we should say all lives matter, even though I would agree with that sentiment too. But I think instead of backing up an organization called Black Lives Matter, I think we should say all Black Lives Matter, and we're going to fight any injustice that would take a black life. And we're going to start by shutting down abortion clinics. And then we're going to go and we're going to do something about fatherless homes, which are producing gangs, and we're going to take care of that problem. And once we take care of that problem, guess what? We're going to start having a talk about how to interact with cops. Because when I was a kid, guess what? I was told, whether by my parents or by driver's ed instructor, I don't even know. I was told when that cop comes up to your car, when he pulls you over, you don't make any sudden moves. You keep your hands on the wheel. 10 and 2. You don't make any sudden movements. If you have a concealed carry permit, which I used to have, used to carry a gun with me every single day. If you have that, you tell them about it. And if they want you to grab the gun, you are doing that super slow. You don't run away from the cop. You don't punch the cop. You don't resist the cop. Whether he's right or wrong, you take it up with the courts afterwards. That's what I was taught. And my mom would say, you do something and you get yourself shot, you might be right, but you're probably going to be dead right. I don't know if you realize, I'm not black, and I was told that. Don't do something that's going to get yourself killed. And so I think we need to have an honest discussion about these things. I think we need to have a discussion that's not filled with emotion and hate. I think we need to have a discussion about abortion and gang violence and fatherlessness. And I'm just telling you, the organization called Black Lives Matter is not going to solve that. And can I tell you why? Because they want to abolish the nuclear family, which when we've seen that happen, it has led to more trouble for the people who have had that happen to them than it's helped. You want a single proof of someone who wasn't white or black? You look in the Bible and you look at Joseph and his family. That was not a nuclear family. Joseph's dad had 4 different wives and about a dozen kids over the course of maybe 7 to 14 years with those 4 wives. You're talking a messed up family. They turned on each other. They threw Joseph in a pit. They slaughtered an entire city because one of the people in the city had raped their sister. I mean, it was a mess. You're telling me we should abolish the nuclear family. I'm going to tell you to go take a statistics class and look at what happens when you remove the father from homes, whether they're white or black. Don't let people lie to you. Tell the truth. And when you hear someone telling the truth, don't play the game of, well, what about? No. If it's true, accept it. We're all going to be hypocritical. We're all going to have inconsistency. But you need to listen to the truth. Guys, I'm going to spend a little bit more time next time, maybe getting into a little bit more of this book. But I want you guys to pay attention to the chaos that's going around us. Use it as an opportunity to pray for our country. Use it as an opportunity to look at the truth. Don't let it be filtered through your emotions. Look at the truth. Look at facts. Don't be caught up in the narrative. Don't be caught up in these emotional arguments. I think the one that got me the most is people who say, well, if you are all for him being shot, are you saying his life doesn't matter because he committed a crime? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying you have to listen. Because a lot of these cases where a cop is shooting someone has nothing to do with race. It has to do with violence and it has to do with resistance. And what I'm saying is we need to have an honest discussion with how we respond to cops, and that's whether you're black or white. And if you are openly defying authority, guess what? Bad things happen. Whether you deserve it or not, bad things happen. And I have had long discussions with people who look like me and people who don't look like me. And I have had disciplinary situations that had absolutely nothing to do with someone's race, but they chose to bring it up that way because they thought I was being racist, because they did something wrong, and I corrected them for it. And I've had people openly defy me because they didn't want to listen to me, because they did not like the fact that I got them in trouble, because they were doing wrong. I'm just telling you, whether it's an authority figure, whether it's a government official, whether it's a parent, you need to have respect for authority. You need to obey authority. And we have certain things set up in our justice system that will take care of improper authority figures. And if I can close on this, the Janus Project, the very logo itself, is meant to picture the S, which means sovereignty of God. And the little arrow is pointing up and the little arrow is pointing back. And so what we can do is we can look at the past, learn stuff about how God works, and that little arrow pointing forward and up helps us to remind ourselves to look up to God and to pay attention to the fact that He is sovereign. And before you go out on that street, and before you protest or burn a building or throw a rock through a window or assault a cop, I want you to think about the fact that God is sovereign, and whether there's injustice in the world or not, God will take care of it, and He will make things right one way or another. You don't have to take justice into your own hands, and you do not have to avenge. In fact, God says, vengeance is mine. I will repay. And so if someone gets off scot-free, you can take it to the bank. God is going to deal with them. And so I'd close it on that. Believe the truth. Take care to make sure you understand what the truth is. Don't believe a lie. And consistently walk in the knowledge that God is sovereign and will take care of it. Guys, it's been a longer episode, but it was a really important topic I wanted to address. I think this could be considered the first Fireside Chat with Uncle Mike. I don't know if you consider that or not, but that's pretty much what I'm going to consider it. It's definitely not a normal Janus Project episode. Guys, if you like this video, share it with a friend, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time on the Janus Project.